How do I know who the economic buyer is, and just, common mistakes and stuff that folks make?
Yeah, you know you're an economic buyer when they can create budget for good ideas.
Mhm.
If they are saying to you, we don't have budget, or I need to get budget, or I need to put this in my budget, or I need pricing to, see if we can even afford to buy this, you are not at an economic buyer. So an economic buyer is typically someone with a C in their title or an SVP at a large organization. Um, it's not someone that can spend money. There's a lot of people in business that can spend money, but unless it's an inbound sale, in other words, there's an active project out there that they have funds for already, and they're looking for a vendor to spend those funds with to solve a pre-identified business problem. Unless you're in that scenario, you are essentially creating a need, driving a change, and in introducing a known or unknown problem and a way to solve it to a business. If you are doing that, you are asking for new money. In order to get new money, they either need to create it or steal it from somebody else.
What's going on? Jason Bay here. Welcome to Blissful Prospecting. If you're listening to this podcast for the first time, I have conversations with top reps, sales leaders, and other sales experts to help you turn complete strangers into paying customers. So today we're talking about a topic that we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about on this podcast, and it's MEDDPICC. And our guest, David Weiss, he's head of sales at LeaseUp. And one of the things I like about David is he's one of those guys that not only teaches things, but he's a practitioner. He's been doing this for almost 10 years, and his clients that implement this typically see a 2x increase in revenue sold, 90% plus forecast accuracy. If you're a sales leader, that's got to sound like a dream, and a 30+% increase in close ratio. So we're going to talk about MEDDPICC and unpack it, how it's evolved, and what it is, what it isn't, and we'll get into some tips on how to implement it as well. So David, this is not our first time talking, but this is our first time recording a podcast together. It's good to see you.
Jason, thanks for having me on, man. Really pumped for this conversation and to be here. Appreciate you.
Yeah. So you shared a story with me I guess while we were preparing for this, and there was a sales leader that you had, I believe it was at ADP, and he was talking about this approach, and you were a little bit resistant about it, if I remember correctly. Tell us, unpack that story a little bit.
So Gregory Donovan, he's still a mentor, really good friend, and what's awesome is so he's the head of sales for a company called Centair, and I'm actually we're coming full circle here. I worked with him almost 10 years ago. He taught me MEDDPICC, and I'm now actually training his entire sales force on
Oh,
MEDDPICC.
wow.
So we just
That's so
finished
cool.
agreeing to that. We've stayed in touch over the years. Like I said, what a good friend, great guy. So it's really cool how this is all coming full circle. But when he first introduced me to MEDDPICC, I was probably that typical, not special, high performing or good performing rep. Been in sales for quite a while, working for ADP, which is a pretty prestigious sales organization, and I thought I had things figured out. So Gregory was a new leader of mine. He approached me with this new methodology, and I was like, "Hey, Greg, I look at the leaderboard. My numbers are good. My close ratios are good. When I tell you I'm going to sell something, I do. All those things." And he's like, "Yeah, but I think you could do more. I think you could do better." And I'm like, "Who is this new guy? Like, so I pushed back and I pushed back, and he kept, he's just a great human. Like he wasn't a jerk about it. He would just, very strategically during like business case reviews and strategy sessions, just ask me questions like, hey David, do we have a mutual action plan in place, or what's their timeline, or hey, what's their decision criteria? Why are they buying from us? Why now? Why change? Who's all involved? And I'd loosely be able to answer some of these questions. Some of them have been like, man, it's a good question. I didn't think about that one. Let me go find that out. And that happened enough to a point where I was like, he's just literally MEDDPICCing me in every single conversation we have, and he's finding gaps in my deals that help me. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe something to this. And he did it very sophisticatedly and respectfully, but he just go through it in his mind every time and ask me questions. And eventually I was like, okay, I now know what he's always going to ask me these things. So unless I'm a jerk to my boss, I need to be ready to answer these questions because he has that right. And then I started seeing the power of those questions, and then I said, screw it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to adopt it myself because why not? And the rest kind of became history for me as I started closing more and teaching others and seeing their success, and so on and so forth.
It's a pretty hilarious story because when I work with managers, I always bring this up. I was like, you teach your reps how to sell. How come you don't use those same techniques on your reps? You can't just leadership, you can't just tell people what to do, that you have to sell them on it. You know what I mean? So I'm curious for you, because what someone might be thinking about methodologies is, do we need a sales methodology? Is it about using this one versus all of the other kind of sales methodologies out there? So is MEDDPICC a sales methodology? Do you look at it like that? And what would you say to someone that's like, dude, there's lots of other things too out there. Why would this be the one, that I would use? How would you walk someone through that?
Yeah, no, I love that question. And so MEDDPICC is not a sales methodology. A methodology is like, I don't even want to define it. You've got your challengers and you've got your gap sellings, and there's spin selling, and there's so many sales methodologies. I'm a believer that there's no one right answer. That there is so much wisdom from all these different points of view, and depending on who you're selling to, when you're selling, like they all have their place. What I like about MEDDPICC is it sits on top of all of that. It's not a sales
Yeah.
process. You're going to follow it linearly. In your first conversation with someone, you're not going to ask them all 8 letters of MEDDPICC, and it's not BANTS. You're not MEDDPICCing someone to death. What the purpose of MEDDPICC, and I look at it as a gap analysis checklist. It is there to sit across your entire deal, and before every meeting, and after every meeting, you look at it and you say, "Huh, do I have this information? Have I built a business case? Do I know who my economic buyer is? Do I know their decision criteria, their decision process? If we're in the deal, do I know the paper process? Have I figured out an identified pain, and have I done it on a persona level? Do I have a champion in there that's selling for me when I'm not there? Do I know who I'm competing against? Is it status quo? Is somebody else? Have I positioned against it? Where do we stand? Like literally, I just went through MEDDPICC. Like I just asked myself those
Yeah.
questions, and then where I see gaps, it's like, okay, now I'm going to dig into those gaps. And then your methodology, buyer centric, seller centric, all the different ways, like that's how you go about getting the answers to the questions you just asked to identify your gaps. But it sits on top of the deal, and it helps you do that.
Yeah. I think that's an important piece of clarification. And it sounds like this is something that if I'm a sales leader, I could use for deal reviews too. This is
So
literally this is the topic and the framework behind the deal review.
yeah, well, I see MEDDPICC deployed successfully. It's a common language. It's a common
Yeah.
view and way of talking about opportunities in business. And to me, MEDDPICC is designed for the rep. It should be adopted by the rep. The rep should just ask themselves the questions I just asked myself a second ago, and see where they have gaps. And then the leader should come over the top and reinforce that in their deal strategy, where the leader's asking questions, the rep's asking those questions, they're seeing where those questions need more detail. And then together they're coming up with, okay, how do we get that information? How do we accomplish that? And that's what the leader is then helping the rep strategize around. So to me, yes, it can be used in deal reviews, business reviews, for the rep, for the leader. The leader, to me, it's all about forecast accuracy. If MEDDPICC isn't good, if someone doesn't really understand paper process and decision process, that's where forecast accuracy gets really tight. Like those are where like you figure those things out, you can figure out exactly when you're getting a deal.
Yeah. And I love that as a rep, you could use this as a way to diagnose,
Yeah.
gaps in your deal as well. So before we get to the sort of what the acronym again stands for and digging into it, I got to know just your personality too. When Gregory was sort of med picking you on this, were you the type of person, like even in your personal life, are you a big systems guy? Are you normally like that? Or did you kind of naturally do a lot of these things and you were just very good? Are you like, tell me a little bit more about that.
It's definitely a hybrid. I'm like one of the, like you'll see on my LinkedIn profile of a picture of a scientist.
Yeah.
I love taking a scientific approach to things. I love figuring out processes. To me, like as a head of sales, one of the things I task myself on is can I build? How can I operationalize something? How can I build it for scale? and how can I operationalize it so the masses can use it easily. MEDDPICC is one of those things that does it for me. So like, yes, I've always kind of viewed myself scientifically. Before MEDDPICC, I kind of just did these things. It was gut. It was maybe I did some of these some of the time. What MEDDPICC gave to me is that consistency, like every single deal
Yeah.
forever. I look at through this lens. I ask myself these questions, and then I can, figure out where I have gaps, consistently gaps, where I need to change my process because I'm always missing these things, stuff like that.
Love it. Let's dig into it. So you want
Cool.
to kind of unpack the acronym again, and let's spend some time talking about each letter and what it means and what we need to do.
Yeah, I'll go through it rapid fire, and then we'll circle back. So M, metrics, that's your business case. E, economic buyer, that's ultimately the person who can create budget for good ideas. A lot of people think of it as the signer. It's not always the signer. It's sometimes the person who, again, who can create budget for good ideas. You have two Ds. You have your decision criteria. That's like the buyer's wish list. You have the decision process, all the people involved, their timeline. Think of it almost your mutual action plans lives there, things like that. Then you have P, and the P is paper process. That's the legal side. There's a difference between a business process and a legal process. And as you get into larger deals, enterprise deals, you really need to understand legal. It's kind of like the difference between, I'd say, small business and even mid-market sales. The legal process isn't as complex just simply because the deals aren't as big and not as many people involved. But when you start getting into enterprise deals, like the paper process is a big deal. It can delay your deal a couple months even. So that's where it's really, large deal forecast accuracy can shift and move and push a lot. Paper process helps with that. You have your I, which is, and depending on what MEDDPICC trainer you talk to, it's either identify pain or implicate pain. The implication of pain, and where people often mix up between pain and metrics, is, pain to me is a feeling and a symptom. Metrics are the output, the business case that wraps around that feeling or symptom to actually drive a return on investment. And then you have your two C's, and your two C's are champions. These are not coaches or people that like me. They're truly a champion, someone selling for me when I'm not there. And then your last one is, who you're competing with in the deal, your competition.
Got it. Let's dig into metrics. So where do you see people messing up when it comes to metrics and business cases and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it's either they're too high level, um, or they don't get, and maybe this is also too high level, but they don't um, get economic buy-in, or sorry, a buy-in from their EB, economic buyer, or they're not quantifying it far enough. So, like, I'll give you an example. There's a lot of people that are like, "We're gonna save you, like, what's your metric today around how much time it takes you to do this thing?" Cool, you do that thing. Our solution improves that thing by 30%. So we're gonna have a 30% time savings on that thing, and they stop there. They don't go as far as say, so if we could save you 30% of that time, how does that impact the business literally down to the dollar? How does that then tie into an operational organizational goal that, grow revenue by this, or save revenue by this, or help you expand into this new market in this way at this time frame? Like, how does it actually tie to a business objective? They miss that. And then they also miss, they get it validated by a end user. They get it validated by, a mid-level decision maker, and they think it's real. And then when it gets to an economic buyer, someone that's ultimately going to sign off, those mid-level folks, or one level below that economic buyer, they're, going to them and presenting the solution. Hopefully they're involved in your deal if they're not, but they're going to that individual and they're saying, "Hey, we want to buy this thing," and that person's saying, "Why?" And they're like, "Well, we want to solve these problems." "Okay, cool. How much does it cost?" "Cost this." "Well, what type of ROI are we going to get for it?" "I don't know." Or, "We're going to get this level ROI." And they're like, "How did you get to that?" And they look at it and they're like, "No, I don't care about those things. We're trying to do this." So if you don't get your economic buyer involved, your economic buyer is going to look at your ROI in it through a different lens than the people below that
Yeah.
economic buyer. And if you don't get the economic buyer to say, "I agree with this and I see it the way you see it," then when it gets to them, you stalled your deal or killed your deal because they can't prioritize it because you're not speaking their language.
So the metrics in the business cases, am I correct in saying that that is for the economic buyer. The only thing that
Absolutely.
matters on that business case is what the economic buyer cares about. And you mentioned something really important. You said connected to a business objective.
Yeah.
So, no, go ahead.
So like to me, when I'm building business cases, I'm looking at it both from a functional level. So I'm trying to think through the lens of all the people this impacts. But what people often miss is they just build it here and they don't build it over here for the economic buyer. You kind of have to do both because
Yeah.
you think like almost like an OKR. You have these your objectives and your key results, and then you have the people under them that are responsible for achieving their piece of that objective and result. But you need to build a business case to both hit here and hit here. And if you aren't, accomplishing it from both, you're missing a piece of the puzzle that someone cares about. So yeah, you're building it kind of through the lens of the different facets and again to your point, tying it back to um, the broader business objective. That is what your economic buyer is going to care about.
Got it. And one other thing you mentioned too, the buy-in piece, I think is super important to make sure that we don't gloss over. You can't just put an ROI, or a business case together with some numbers that people look at and like, where the hell did you get these numbers, dude? So there's, I'm assuming, a lot of collaboration involved with getting the metrics and being like, hey, dude, are these believable? Like, I think working together with them to do it and getting their stamp of approval is super important.
Yeah, it's funny. And I always get a challenge or an eyebrow raised when I say this. A business case doesn't need to be right; it just needs to be agreeable. And
Yeah.
so many people spend time trying to make it perfect just to get to an economic buyer who destroys it because they view it through a different lens. It doesn't need, and frankly, a good economic buyer is going to de-risk the hell out of it. If you're saying I'm going to give you a 10x ROI, they don't want to go to their board, their CFO. They don't want to go to other key stakeholders that sit at the table with them and say I'm bringing a 10x ROI to the business. They don't need to. They can say I'm getting a
Yeah.
2x ROI, and when they get a 5 or a 10, they look like like massive champions. They don't want to overcommit, so they're going to de-risk it. They're going to beat it up. They just want to get to a point where it's like, I agree that we're going to get to at least here, and I'm comfortable with what you've shared with me that I believe you can get us there. And
Yeah.
that's the end goal.
Love it. Let's talk about economic buyer. A little bit more detail on what is the economic buyer? How do I know who the economic buyer is? And just, common mistakes and stuff that folks make.
Yeah, you're an economic buyer when they can create budget for good ideas.
Mhm.
If they are saying to you, we don't have budget, or I need to get budget, or I need to put this in my budget, or I need pricing to, see if we can even afford to buy this. You are not at an economic buyer. So an economic buyer is typically someone with a C in their title or an SVP at a large organization. It's not someone that can spend money. There's a lot of people in a business that can spend money, but unless it's an inbound sale, in other words, there's an active project out there that they have funds for already, and they're looking for a vendor to spend those funds with to solve a pre-identified business problem. Unless you're in that scenario, you are essentially creating a need, driving a change, and in introducing a known or unknown problem and a way to solve it to a business. If you are doing that, you are asking for new money. In order to get
Yeah.
new money, they either need to create it or steal it from somebody else. So, in those situations, the reason why the economic buyer is so important is because you want to deal today. You want to deal now. You don't want to deal in a year or 2 years from now when you hit that next budget cycle or cycles. If you are at someone who cannot create budget, you are literally at the whims of budgetary cycles. If you're with someone that can create budget, budgetary cycles no longer matter. This individual can look at the problem you're trying to solve, how you're trying to solve it, the business case around it, and say, I'm taking money from this department, or I'm creating money because I can see this making me money. I'm just going to go do it. And if you're not at that level, you're just delaying your deal. It doesn't mean you won't win. It just means you're going to take longer than getting it right now.
Yeah. So multi-threading, because typically these are not the people you're doing the first sales call with, in my experience at least.
Well,
Typically this is going to require a decent amount of multi-threading. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. Well, and to me, it kind of depends. Like, I'm a big fan of Brandon Fluharty and Jamal Reimer, and one of the things Jamal and I talk about, and he talks about all the time, is kind of um, is transformation, and getting to executives and in different ways to do that. I'm a very big fan of starting with the economic buyer,
Yeah.
um, sharing with them directionally what we've done, sharing my big idea with them, and directionally the ROI it could have for them, and then getting pushed down with an agreement with them that we're coming back. I'm coming back, but let's go to all the functional people within the business to understand deeper levels of the problem, do better quantification, make sure we get buy-in and consensus across multiple stakeholders that touch different things, and then bring my findings back to this economic buyer with a reason to change or not. I'm a big fan of that approach. Now, that's a executive level. That's a harder approach. It's not what most sellers do. But I love it. I think it's the right way to do it. But otherwise, yes, you are starting at normally mid tier, and then kind of like climbing the mountain and working your way up to an economic buyer eventually.
Got it. Cool. I love that you distinguish this as a person that can create budget too. It's a completely different ballgame, when you're talking to people like that, and love it. So we got metrics, economic buyer, the next D, decision criteria. So what is this, and what are some common mistakes that people make?
Yeah, so decision criteria are the buyer's wish list. So
Yeah.
here's a problem that they're trying to solve. The real question is, how are they trying to solve it? So I'll give you an example. Like, someone may be someone may be trying to solve that problem by hiring. Like, let's use a really common one: hiring headcount. We need more pipeline. That's a problem we want to solve. So you can kind of do that three ways, or a combination of all three. To get more pipeline, you can have the staff you have work harder. You can enable that staff with technology to be more efficient. You can hire more staff, or you can outsource the staff. So four ways. Let's say four ways. Now, if I am trying to solve that pipeline problem, but I don't want to buy technology in your technology company, well, we're misaligned. If I want to, if I just want to hire more people, and you're a recruiting agency that's going to help me hire more people, cool. Well, now we're aligned. If you're a company that wants to outsource that, well, no, I want them to be my people. I don't want to outsource it. So just because you can solve the problem doesn't mean it's how they want to solve the problem. So you
Yeah.
need to do one or two things. You either need to get them to change how they want to solve the problem, or you need to get really well aligned to how they want to solve the problem, to get your deal. And a really common mistake people make is they don't understand that, or they don't understand the maturity of the customer. So maybe I'm this company and I can solve that problem and 10 other problems that they are having or will eventually have. It's a big solution. We're awesome. We'll crush it. We're great. We're the best. Well, if I'm a super mature organization that needs all of that, that's fantastic. But what if I'm not? Or what if I will be there, but I'm not there today? I'll be there in 3 years. Well,
Yeah.
each of those features functions cost money. So even though you're great and can solve that problem and lots of others, you're misaligned. You're going to be three times as expensive as what they have budgeted, because they're low on maturity. They want to solve this. They don't want to solve this. So that causes a problem. Or the other way, you solve it in a very narrow way, and they're a very mature organization. They're looking to solve it in all these different ways. So decision criteria to me is so critical, because you have to solve the problem the way they want to solve it at the maturity level that they're trying to solve it. And you as the seller need to figure out all of that so you can present it to them the right way. And that can be a lot and way more complex than a lot of people are doing. And the way you accomplish that often is really good questioning, really good discovery. And then my personal favorite is building a scorecard. And what you're doing is you're building a scorecard of your key core feature function. You're getting aligned with the buyer on if they agree that's what they want in a solution. You're differentiating that scorecard to the things that make you stand out, and then you're providing it to them to use with other vendors to do their evaluation. And hopefully, if you've built it right, you're scoring higher than the others. So, man, I just said a whole hell of a lot, but that's the idea of decision criteria done
Yeah. Tell me more about the scorecards. That's pretty interesting.
right. So don't need to be overly complex. Uh, Essentially, think of like the simplest way I've seen it done, an Excel spreadsheet. So similar to an RFP that a company sends to you, when a company sends you an
Mm.
RFP, that's their scorecard. And what they're doing is
Yeah.
they're having you fill it out, and then they're ranking you against every other vendor they sent the RFP to. This is almost like a reverse RFP. You're going to them with a list of feature functions that you do really, really well and written in such a way that it differentiates you. And then you're saying, hey, evaluate our demo against this and evaluate everyone else's demos against it and then score them and then tell me which one scored the highest. And you're also getting aligned on, are we missing anything? That's us, but do you need all this stuff? Do you not need some of it? Do you need more? Because now you're starting to see where your gaps are.
Yeah. That's pretty clutch. You definitely want to make sure to carefully go through that so it doesn't backfire. So-
But if it does backfire,
yeah.
you're potentially misaligned. Like you'd probably lose anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So the second D, decision process. You mentioned mutual action plans. When do you start to talk about a mutual action plan?
Yeah, and I'll answer that, and then decision process is layers even more than that. But the mutual action plan, where I love talking about that, it's often like in a lot of people's like deal stages, it's like stage like 2.5. It's right
Mm.
around when you're asking the question to them of, hey, it looks like you like what we have. It seems to solve a problem that you're trying to solve. Ideally, when would you want to be live? And you're asking that question. Ideally, when would you want to be live? And it's not like when do you want to sign a contract or when are you buying us or when are we starting our implementation. It's nuanced. It's more sophisticated than that. If you were to buy a vendor, any vendor, when would you want to be live? And what's great about that question is like, well, we ideally want to solve this problem and be live in 3 months. It's like, oh, you want to be live in 3 months? Cool. Well, our solution takes a month to implement. So we don't actually have 3 more months to figure this out. We have two. How long does your contracting process take? Oh, well, our contracting process takes 3 weeks. Oh, so we actually don't have 2 months. We only have a month and a week. How long does your security review process take? Oh, well, that infosec and security that takes about 3 weeks too. Oh, so we actually have about 3 to 4 weeks to figure this out. Just out of curiosity, what other steps are involved in this? Who else needs to be involved? Oh, well, we've had these conversations, but we're going to need to get sign off from this person, and we want to go through an implementation session with you guys, and we need to do this. Oh, well, man, it looks like we need to put a lot of things on the calendar, and we need to accomplish all of them in the next 3 weeks. Is that how do we drive urgency there? Maybe we need to have a couple meetings a week now between now and the next couple weeks to be able to hit that timeline, then this timeline, then this timeline, then this timeline. And now all of a sudden, you just instead of trying to be a pushy salesperson, you are now turning into a advisor, and it's like I'm now
Yeah.
consulting with you on how to get you live when you want to be live, and we need to do all these things. And now you can start putting pressure on all of that stuff.
Yeah. I love that. I've even seen reps sometimes kind of hint at it, even in that first disco call. If they have 45 minutes, an hour for that first disco call where they'll just do a quick screen share. Hey, you sound really interested in this. Here's kind of what here's what that process might look like. It's interesting. So what else do we need to know about decision process?
So decision process, mutual action plan, but it's also things like um, uh, technical criteria, budget, all people involved, and why. It's really that kind of map of everything that goes into making a decision. In the and again, decision process and the process around it. So you have your criteria, wish list, and then you have essentially everything else around making that decision and all the stakeholders and timelines and budgetary cycles and yada yada. All of that kind of goes into decision process.
Where's one place where you see reps missing the boat the most?
Really, the mutual action plan. Figuring out
Yeah.
that time and working backwards towards it. Backwards timeline to me are so powerful, and reps often will miss it. And what's really interesting. They're like it's like you present the proposal. It's like, so when are you guys making a decision? Oh, 6 months from now. It's like, whoa, shit. Maybe you shouldn't have presented the proposal yet, because I'm guarantee something's going to change in the next 6 months. So it's like you really trying to figure that out early, and to me, that's kind of again post demo. You're aligned on that you can solve the problem you're trying to solve. Now it's like, okay, when do you want to solve it? And working backwards and talking through those things really does inform so much of your next actions and when and why. And without that information and working backwards through it, like you could have a gross misalignment and not even know it.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Work backwards. So P for paper process. What do we need to know about this?
Yeah. So your paper process is your decision process, kind of mutual action plan again, applied to legal. So this is who's all involved in a legal review. Are they inside outside counsel? What priority is this deal? How many other deals do they have in front of them? How long does this normally take from start to finish when you guys have done something like this before? What are the steps on your side? Like, when can we get first pass red lines? When can we get this? When can we get that? It encompasses all of those things. There's also flavors of it beyond that are like, do you have your give to gets mapped? So this is one of the things I teach people to build is like, if someone asks for, a decrease in term, are you willing to ask them for an increase in cost? If someone asks you for a decrease in cost, are you willing to ask them for an increase in term? Are you willing to, if someone, wants a decrease in implementation costs, are you willing to like go to bat and fight for them to be, referenceable and use their name on their website and a certain number of case studies and testimonials? Like, do you have it
Yeah.
well mapped out that anytime someone asks you for something, you know what you're asking for back? There's also, a flavor here of negotiation posture where it's like you haven't given a discount yet until you're at the paper process stage, because you know that as soon as you hit procurement, they're going to ask for stuff. And if you've given stuff before that point, that's your new starting point, and knowing when and how
Yeah.
to navigate that conversation. So those are some of the like key elements of the paper process.
Yeah. Yeah. The give to gets, thinking about that in advance is so important. Do you find that reps are just way too willing to lower their price arbitrarily without asking for anything in return?
If they haven't been trained to do something different, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough. A lot of companies, the folks with sort of less experience on the enterprise side, oftentimes what I'll see too is the rep is still like, it doesn't really hurt their commission at all. They're almost incentivized to just get the deal to cross the finish line. And there's no real thinking around the profitability of it, which is really crazy. I don't know what you see.
I see reps very much just want to sell stuff
Yeah.
and not really think about the implications of the decisions they make. And one of the things
Yeah.
I teach is like, look, you need to expect to get squeezed. You will absolutely get squeezed. You will get asked for a price concession in every single deal, no matter what. You are not in a deal unless someone's asking for a discount. So if you say you give 10% on every single deal you sell, guess what? You now need to make that delta up, and you are now 10% farther away from goal. If you miss your annual goal by 10% because you gave 10% discounts, you finished the year at 90%, like, shame on you. Like, you chose to miss quota. You gave that away. You could have protected that. And one of the things I don't realize is buyers are trained to ask for discounts. If you simply say no, and you've done a good enough job of building the business case and selling to value and solving a problem, someone will be like, okay, I just had to ask. And you'll be
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I'm so happy I didn't give it away. The other thing is,
Yeah.
the second you start giving stuff away, the buyer's like, well, shit, that was easy. I'm going to ask for more. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't they? Until you are comfortable saying no, you're going to get continued to ask for stuff. So one of my best tricks, say no early. And if they're like, well, no, in order for us to move forward, we need this at this price. Great. So if I give you that cost, are you signing it today? Well, no, we still need to do all these other things. Okay, well then we're not even ready to talk cost yet. So like it's just no, just being comfortable with those conversations is just so key.
Yeah. What deal size would you recommend that someone really takes MedPick pretty seriously? What sort of minimum deal size would someone need, or type of sale might this apply best for?
So it's interesting. I have taught this to folks selling $5,000 deals all the
Oh,
way up
wow.
to multi-million, tens of $1 million dollars.
Yeah.
The major difference between it is on the smaller end of the segment, we're typically stripping out paper process and we're blending it into decision process.
Mhm.
We're stripping out maybe the need for champions because in a smaller deal there aren't as many. You're only just a single decision maker, maybe one or two. So there isn't as much of a need for it. Um, or you're skinning down the rigor of getting certain questions answered. Um, but the foundational elements of MedPick, to me, are ubiquitous across every single deal, no matter what you're selling. No matter what you're selling, you need to have a business case for change. You need to be talking to someone that can actually, sign your deal. You need to know why they're buying. You need to know when they're buying. Again, contractual is the one, like you can sometimes wrap that in decision process, but you need to have some level of pain, no deal. You need to have, often a champion, but again, that one's a little mixed. You need to know who you're competing against. Is it status quo or is it another competitor, and why they should choose you versus others? To me, like these are just foundational elements of every single type of transaction that happens.
Yeah.
So they apply. It's just like how deeply do you need to go based on the size of the deal?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about identify pain. And do you use pain and problem interchangeably? Those two words? Or are they different to you?
Um, I'm trying to think. I want to think about that. Um, I do. I do. I often talk about them very similarly. Um, to me, and where I go with identifying pain is like the it's not just one person. You need to identify the pain for every single person that you talk to and every person that's involved in the deal. You need to almost be seeking out people and seeking out pain. Now, pain, problem, yeah, I would use those interchangeably. And again, it goes back to the individual. Like, what is the problem this person's trying to solve? What's the problem this person's trying to solve? Like, what's the pain around the problem? Those things are often kind of really, well tied together.
Yeah. So, where do you see reps kind of falling short when it comes to identifying pain? And how do I know if I've identified pain?
So where they're falling short is often they don't one they stay single threaded. They don't do discovery with
Mm.
enough people. If you know the decision team because you've asked the question is 5 6 people, which is pretty standard mid market, 8 10 12 people in enterprise, um, and you've only done what I call like discovery, like deep discovery, like you've gone through your discovery questions and figured out each individual's workflow and process and bottlenecks on all those things and exactly how your solution solves that specifically to them. People make assumptions that like, oh, these 2 people are in the same department, so they must be exactly the same. It's like they may be in the same department, but you know, working and trying to accomplish different things, and they may be struggling to accomplish those things in different ways, and your solution may help them in different ways. So they folks just cast too broad of a stroke across their deal with the pain. That's a big one. The other one is that they're not really spending time one on one to deeply understand the process. It's like, oh, you have a problem generating revenue. Cool, we help you sell more stuff. Like, okay, I know your pain. Like, I've
Yeah.
always one of the things I've often said is like, if the problem you're solving or the pain that you are representing is exactly the same for every single customer, you don't know pain well enough
Yeah.
because there's the pain that your solution is designed to solve for, But then there's the underlying of what's actually happening in the business for the individual around that. And that's often
Mhm.
the nuances that people miss.
Got it. That's a really interesting insight there. Shouldn't be the same for every customer. So it's the story around the pain and the problem and the impact it's really having for that organization is unique for
Yeah.
every
And
organization. It's not a cookie cutter kind of thing.
for the organization and for the individuals within it.
Yeah. Gotcha. Champions. Let's talk about champions. I think it's good to clarify, like you did with an economic buyer too. How do I know if someone is a champion?
Mm. Are
I
they
sell to
willing?
salespeople, so we use that nomenclature too. I'm your
We know.
champion, right? So outside of that, because I haven't really sold a lot outside of that, um, in a B2B context at least, what's that like?
So are they selling for you when you're not there? So
Yeah.
uh, are they are they going to bat for you? Are they helping you prep for meetings? Are they giving you insider information? Um, I often teach people how to intentionally build champions, and to me, one of the best ways to intentionally build a champion is you have a demo. 4 or 5 people show up to the demo. Before that meeting, did you send each of them an individualized note around asking what they'd like to get out of the meeting, what they're trying to solve for, give them some insights specifically to their role, and then ask for time to regroup afterwards. And then after the meeting, did you follow up on that and schedule time with each of them individually on what they saw, what they thought, how it can help them, what problem they were trying to solve for? Um, and really start to, again, intentionally build them as an advocate for you and really understand and get to like even a personal professional win place where it's like, hey, if we solve for this, what does that mean for you? Oh, well, it means for me that I'm going to have to spend 5 hours a week less on this process. Cool. What are you going to do with those 5 hours? Do you get home to your family an hour earlier per day? Does that allow you to be more strategic? Does that get you a promotion? Does that help you, do this better? Like, what are you going to do with that time? Figuring that out and getting someone excited about that, because that's why people buy stuff. They buy it. People listen to your show because they want to go to President's Club, because they want to make more money. Like that's why people do stuff, is for these personal wins. That you need to figure that out, and so like the champion is vocalizing that stuff to you. The champion is willing to, prior to your meeting, tell you who's going to be there, what are they looking for, what are the behind the scenes back, the internal meetings that you're not privy to, what happened, what was discussed, what was the outcome. They're willing to give you all that, and then they're willing to collaborate with you, and then take what you give them and do stuff with it and get you in front of the right people, and again, it's selling for you when you aren't there. They're willing to do all those things.
Gotcha. And last one, competitors. So what do we need to know about this?
There's always two. One is status quo. 57% of all deals end in status quo. No change. Best way to rock something off no change, a business case with an economic buyer. All day long. Two most important things. If you want someone to make a change, give them a financial reason to do it, and make sure you're with someone that can create budget for good ideas. You do that, someone makes a change. Now, here's the interesting part. Doesn't mean they make a change with you. It just means they are going to probably do something different.
Yep.
So that's where then the other side of the coin comes in. So there's the why change message, and then there's the why you message. And so that's the other side. So why you is why your company is uniquely positioned to solve their problem, different than the rest of the landscape. And that's inherently, you need to understand their problem. You need to understand what they want in a solution. And then you need to explain to them why yours can help them achieve that better than others. And in a tactful way, in a consultative way, explain to them the nuanced differences between your solution and others, and offer them up questions that they can ask other potential vendors on how they approach solving that problem in a way that
Yep.
gets that company to say, wait, I realize the landscape. I see the differences. I see how these vendors solve it this way. I see how that you solve it this way. And I'm in camp you, not camp them. That's good competitive stance.
Got it. Yeah, 57% of deals. I think in certain segments it might even be higher. you know?
That's a broad question to ask, but yes, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, dude, this has been really great, man. I love we got to do a kind of a deep dive here into a couple of them. But before we have you take off, I got a couple of rapid fire questions for you. You ready?
Let's go, man. This has been fun.
So, from an outbound standpoint, if you had to choose between phone, email, or social, what do you pick and why?
Trick question. You have to do all three or you're failing.
Yep. What is something you believe about sales that most would disagree
Was that
with?
the right answer, Jason, or are you looking for something different?
There's no right or wrong answer.
Okay, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, what's something you believe about sales that most would disagree with?
Mm. I, honestly, I think today we have gone through um, a movement. We've gone through a change, and I think a lot of people back in the day got into sales just to make lots of money, and to me, money is a byproduct. I do feel like the sellers of today believe that they are there to help people make strategic change and transformation. And I've always looked at sales, and the reason I got into sales is I like solving interesting problems.
Yeah.
And so I believe that's what sales is you are there to help shepherd people through change and to solve problems. Now, I will say I don't think that's unique anymore. I do think that has our profession has transformed into that, and I'm very happy about that. But for anybody out there that doesn't maybe look at it that way, maybe then that's unique to them.
Yeah. And lastly, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to yourself as a rookie sales professional?
That to me is an easy one. Treat your career like a professional athlete. Um, you are making a decision to be in sales. It is arguably, in my mind, the greatest profession in the world. You get to make and help organizations transform into be better versions of themselves. You get paid lots of money to do it. You have tremendous amounts of freedom. Has the lowest barrier of entry with the highest potential earnings of any profession in the world. You need to take that seriously. And when I say treat it like a professional athletes, they watch game tape. They try and get 1% better every single day. They read the books. They find the mentors. They listen to their coaches. They are students of their chosen profession. Um, you need to be that to be successful or reach your ultimate potential. And man, to me, like that's the thing I see people missing and a lot is they don't take our profession seriously enough.
Yeah. Dude, I love that. Well, before you take off, let us know where can we connect with you? You have a course on MEDDPICC that I think people should check out. So let us know where people can connect with you and learn more about the course.
Like you, man, I'm all over LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. David Weiss at LeaseUp. But yeah, definitely hit me up on LinkedIn. I respond to every message I get. And then my MedPick class is MEDDPICC.co. So medpic.co.